Ottawa at Canada for his postdoctoral fellowship program. Then from 2009 to 10, he was also at the University of Victoria, Canada. 2007-8 postdoctoral fellow at St. Xavier's University, North Canada again. And 2005 and 6, he had his postdoctoral associateship at University of Minnesota, Minneapolis, USA. So we are very proud of you, Sanjeev, that you graduated from our college and you have built up a nice and wonderful career in earth science. And today, under the Platinum Jubilee Lecture Series of the department, and also to commemorate Earth Day, we are having your presentation on a very, very interesting topic which you have suggested, that is too much or too little, a story of nitrogen in our environment. So with these few words, I once again thank dear Sanjeev for his remarkable achievement in the field of earth science and his contribution to biogeochemistry of the elements like nitrogen and carbon. So over to you, Sanjeev, for your presentation.
Thank you very much, sir. It's always nice to talk to all of you and come back to our alma mater. I think I know that Akari probably gave the last talk, and he's our batchmate. So 4 of us in the same batch moved to IIT Roorkee for our MTech, and Akari went to the University of Delhi, I think. And from there, we had a different paths. So thank you very much. Today I'm going to give a talk or lecture or whatever you want to call it on a topic called too much or too little, the story of nitrogen in our environment. Can you see the full slide? Full mode?
Yes, slides are visible. Yes.
Okay. So now if you look at the first slide itself, you see 4 photographs. One is like children standing in the line for food. The other is farmer fertilizing his field with fertilizer. And the other 2 pictures shows you a water body with green in color. Now if you see, there is a common connection in all these photos. And that common thread is nitrogen. And see, when it comes to nitrogen, it's a very important element, isn't it? Like without nitrogen, you cannot imagine life because it's a building block of life itself. For example, amino acids, which forms part of protein. But the problem with nitrogen nowadays is, like in some environment, like in urban ecosystems or in the water bodies around the urban areas or agricultural fields, it's too much. But there is vast expanse of earth where there is very little nitrogen. And as we go along in our talk, we'll see that how it is happening. So there is one paradox which we biogeochemists normally observe or say is that first it was all around us, but we could not use it. Now we know how to use it, and it's threatening the planet. And it's about nitrogen. As I move in the talk, you will see what I mean about that. But before we go forward, let us just see about nitrogen, very basics of nitrogen. Nitrogen, as you know, atomic number is 7, atomic weight is 14. And I personally use the elemental composition and isotopes of nitrogen to understand different processes in nature. So nitrogen has 2 stable isotopes. One is 14 nitrogen, other is 15 nitrogen. Now, in nature, almost all the nitrogen is 14N and only 0.366 atom percent is 15N. It means if you take 300 atoms of nitrogen, only one is 15 and others are 14. Now, if you measure this 14 by 15 ratio or 15 by 14 ratio in different compartments of the earth, you will likely to get different ratios. And this is the characteristics which we isotope biogeochemists use to understand the nature. Now nitrogen has another important thing is, it's like a chameleon. It's like we call gigit. It changes kind of form from nitrate to ammonium depending on the redox condition. So when you study nitrogen cycle, it is very complex as well as very interesting to study. Now let us just go back to our primary school. In primary school, we are taught that, okay, photosynthesis is a process where water and carbon dioxide in presence of sunlight produces the plant body. Now for this, we need nutrients. These nutrients is basically nitrogen, phosphorus, etc. Right? So here also nitrogen plays an important role. Now when you go to the ocean, for example, if you see the elaborate pathway of photosynthesis in the ocean, in ocean there are small organisms called phytoplankton. Now these phytoplanktons take up CO2 from the atmosphere, which is dissolved in the ocean water, and in the presence of nitrogen and phosphorus, they produce their body. And then once they complete their life cycle, some of it they go and settle to the ocean bottom. So if you look at this process, what is happening is the CO2 from atmosphere is being formed into the organic body, and then this organic body, some part of it goes and settles into the ocean bottom for a very long time. So effectively what you are doing is you are removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and setting it to the ocean bottom for a very long time. Now if you look at this equation, you will find that this nitrogen, just a minute, so this CNP ratio, that is phosphorus, nitrogen or carbon ratio, has a fixed pattern. So there was a scientist called A.C. Redfield. In 1935, he published a paper where he said that if you go to the ocean water and if you measure nitrate to phosphate ratio, there is a fixed pattern. Now, if you measure the same ratio in the particulate organic matter in the ocean, they also have the same ratio. So it became a chicken and egg problem. Which is governing what? Is the chemistry of the water is governing the life or biology in the ocean, or biology is governing the chemistry in the ocean? This ratio came to know as the Redfield ratio. That is, for every 1 atom of phosphorus, you have 16 atoms of nitrogen and 106 atoms of carbon. After that, many scientists started looking for similar ratios in the terrestrial systems like soil, foliage, soil microbiome. But somehow, although they follow a pattern, but it's not as robust as what you find in the ocean. That is like a Redfield ratio. Now, if you look at our human body, we also have a set pattern of these elements. We also follow a stoichiometry. Our body also follows a stoichiometry. If you look at this, okay, by the way, this Sterner and Nelson is a book all about the ecological stoichiometry. And Sterner was the person with whom I did this postdoctoral at University of Minnesota. So what this ratio tells you that for every 1 milligram of cobalt, we have around 35 kilogram of oxygen in our body. So this is the ratio we have in our body. And but without cobalt or without molybdenum or without chromium, we wouldn't have, we need that kind of a ratio to have sustained life. Now let us think that when you think about the life, you have hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, etc. very easily available in the atmosphere. For example, water and oxygen you can take from the hydrogen and oxygen you can take from the water. Carbon dioxide you can take from the atmosphere, but it is not same for nitrogen, which is very counterintuitive if you think about it. Because the atmosphere is full of nitrogen, and here I am telling you that the nitrogen which we have in the atmosphere cannot be used by life as it is. It's just because nitrogen has this N triple bond N, which is very difficult to break. So you see, when we use any element, we want we want to spend less energy. We want to spend as less energy as possible. So what we do, we go for a form of nitrogen which is called reactive nitrogen. This reactive nitrogen is nothing but in the form of ammonium and nitrate. So let us just see about the nitrogen. Let us divide into two forms: unreactive nitrogen, which is N2, and then reactive nitrogen, which is nitrate and ammonium. Now, so just because we cannot use, or life autotrophs cannot use direct N2 in their body, they go for this ammonium and nitrate. Now, before, if you look at the history of nitrogen, there was a very big problem came into being. When you look at the nitrogen history, just around before 1800, nitrogen was discovered by the efforts of scientists like Searle, Lavoisier, etc. And then around 1850, we came to know that nitrogen is nutrient by a scientist called Living. He said that, okay, nitrogen appears to be a very important element, which is important for sustenance of life by the autotrophs. And then how this nitrogen comes to be as a fertilizer? Then there is a process called biological nitrogen fixation. So there are some microorganisms, some organisms like trichodesmium, blue-green algae, or symbiotic bacteria in the legumes like soybean, which they directly take N2 from the atmosphere and fix into the soil. Now, once it comes into the soil, once this material decomposes, they are released as nitrate and ammonium. So you see, this atmospheric nitrogen into the N2 is fixed in the legumes or in the microorganisms, and then they decompose and bring back nitrate and ammonium, which later goes into the cycle of nitrogen. So, but as the population of the world was increasing, so this blue one is like a human population in millions. So as the population started increasing, somewhere in 1900, we realized that world is actually running out of fertilizers. World is actually running out of nitrogen because the food production was lagging behind the demand. So 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 all the nitrogen which was available due to the biological nitrogen fixation through the natural process or through the lightning was not enough to sustain the food demand by the human population. But luckily, at the same time, these two gentlemen appeared into the picture, Hayward and Boss. In 1913, around that time, they discovered that you can kind of produce ammonium by use of nitrogen and hydrogen. And then the mass scale production of this fertilizer happened. And for this discovery, they won the Nobel Prize, actually. So now you look at the same curve, what you realize that around this time, this production of fertilizer happened. And then you see the green one, which is a Haber nitrogen production through the Haber and Boss process, it started picking up, right? So whatever demand we had for fertilizer to produce food was being met by the Haber and Boss process. So if you see the world population also started rising very fast. So some say that because of the Haber and Boss process, you had this ammonium or nitrate production, which which was needed for the production of the food, was responsible for increase in the world's population as well. So this is how this Haber and Boss process was responsible for the food production as well. So the question comes is, here I'm telling you that nitrogen is such a good element it requires for the life, and then we have this ammonium and nitrate in that environment because of this Haber and Boss process. So why I'm telling you at the same time that it is too much for us now? Why I'm telling you at the same time that it is threatening our planet? So maybe because when it is too much of a good thing, जैसे हिंदी में हम बोलते हैं कि किसी भी चीज की अति हो जाती है, वो same चीज is probably happening here. That it is maybe too much of a good thing. If you compare these two scenarios before the Industrial Revolution and after the Industrial Revolution, this overall population has increased manyfold. Now at least more than that. Earlier we used to have this kind of agriculture. Now we have this industrialized agriculture happening everywhere. Now we used to have an environment like this. Now we have this fossil fuel production, and so these all scenario before Industrial Revolution and what is happening is now has changed the production of reactive nitrogen manyfold in the system. So because of all this nitrogen which is coming into the environment is in the environment, and how it is harming us we will see later. So let us just assume that what is happening to this nitrogen which is being produced in the in the industry. Let us assume that 100 kilogram of fertilizer is being produced, right? Now, if you look at this paper published by Galloway and Cowling, many papers have been published in this topic. If you realize that whatever is being produced, say 100 kilogram is produced, only 14 kilogram is consumed by us if you are a vegetarian. Because by the time it comes from this, from the warehouse, storehouse to the consumption, it leaks into the system, right? For example, when fertilizer, this farmer is fertilizing his field, for example, not all of them goes into the crop. Many of them leaks into the system through this water. Then when you harvest it, some part of the crop you leave in the field, right? When you harvest, from the harvest to the actual grain, you leave some part of it to the system again. So out of 100 kilogram, only 14 is being consumed by us user if you are vegetarian. System becomes worse when you are non-vegetarian because you have this animal coming in between in the feed, right? So some part of it is being excreted by these animals. So only 4% is being consumed by us. So where does all this nitrogen goes? It goes into our environment. It goes into our system, right? So if you look at the system, we call in nitrogen cycle nitrogen cascading. For example, if a farmer is fertilizing his field somewhere around, just a minute, somewhere around this area, ultimately because of the rain and all, it will be washed to this aquatic system, to the streams, to the rivers. Even say, for example, our Ganges or many streams, right? They all wash this nitrogen into the streams. They come around, follow the river, and they go into the coastal ocean, right? Now, so what happens? What happens because of this excess nitrogen presence into our system? That I will tell you just one slide later. Now, if you look at this reactive nitrogen creation, what was scenario in 1995 and what it will be in future, for example, in 2050, you can see so much reactive nitrogen we are going into our environment. So Why I'm worried? I'm worried because of this cycle. What happens? See, once the river or fresh water or I would ask the students or any one of you, when you go out into the countryside, you see these small ponds, which we call poker around there, right? If you go there, you see that water is all greenish. Everywhere you see, you hardly find any clean water. So why? Mostly because you have a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus into the system. Once this nitrogen and phosphorus is brought into by the rivers or the streams into the water body, because what happens is, because of the CO2 is already available into the atmosphere and dissolved into the water, you have already nitrogen and phosphorus coming into this through rivers. There's a lot of production of algal matter into the surface water. Excuse me. A lot of algal matter is produced into the surface water because the rate of photosynthesis accelerates. Now, because it's a living being, they die and decompose, right? Then when they die and decompose, the opposite of the photosynthesis happens, because this organic matter, they require oxygen to decompose, right? To produce again this CO2 and H2O, same material from what they were made up of. So because of that, there's a creation of hypoxia or water hypoxia in the below water. That is, oxygen goes below a certain limit, and then it affects the species living in the water. So that is how they affect the ecosystem. Now, if you look at this potential hazard of this whole cycle, which I'm telling you, is because they increase the algal productivity. Because this algal productivity is increased, there is shift in the community structure, like these small bioorganisms or organisms. The community shifts. For example, if there is a clean water, then certain kind of species are used to living in that. Now, if you put a lot of ammonium, a lot of nitrate, a lot of phosphorus into the system, there will be increased productivity. Because of this increased productivity, the zooplankton which was thriving earlier may shift to another zooplankton. Then some of these algal blooms which develop can be very harmful. Then there is a degradation of seagrass and algal beds, and then, of course, as I told you, there is increased demand for oxygen because it is of the decomposition of the organic matter. Then the development of hypoxia happens. Now, when this development of hypoxia happens, there you create a zone in the water where there is a less oxygen. When there is a less oxygen, there's a production of greenhouse gases like nitrous oxide, because what we call a process called denitrification starts happening, where once the oxygen is finished, then this organic matter, they attack nitrate to get decomposed. When they reduce the nitrate through a microbially mediated process called denitrification, you produce a gas called nitrous oxide. This nitrous oxide is a greenhouse gas. And then, of course, this acidification of the fresh water happens. So ultimately, they affect different ecosystems like coastal oceans, estuary, freshwater, forest ecosystems, etc. One of the most prominent example of this nitrate pollution or for development of hypoxia is the Gulf of Mexico. What happens, like we have Ganges and Brahmaputra. In America, there is a river called Mississippi, which drains almost 55% of the agricultural land in America. And because all these fertilizers being put into all these upstates, they bring this nitrogen into the Mississippi River. And then the river ultimately dumps into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the same process, as the nitrogen comes into the system, this productivity starts increasing. And through the process I told you, there's a creation of a hypoxic zone. That is a zone where the oxygen goes below around 2 millimole per liter. Milligram per liter, and then you create a zone of hypoxia, and there are some portion which is called almost like a dead zone, where there is no microbial, there is no biological activity which presents, or very little biological activity which presents. So this is the whole extent, which is around 6,765 square miles area in the Gulf of Mexico is affected because of this process. And this is not only in the Gulf of Mexico, in fact. So now people are laughing that in the ocean or any aquatic body, probably you will have to put a sign like this, that there is no oxygen exists in the next 10 miles. Now, if you look worldwide, this is a scenario. This is what the review paper published by Diaz and Selman long back. Now, I would expect that these dots might have increased. These dots represent nothing but hypoxic waters in the coastal waters. Again, what happens? The same in these regions, all these coastal waters are affected because of this process because of the process I already told you. And these are all the hypoxic waters. Even in India, we have some zones where we find the evidence of hypoxia. Although they are not permanent hypoxia, there are seasonal hypoxia at least in India, so far as I know. But in Europe and Northern America, there are many zones where they have seen that around a lot of zones where their hypoxic system exists. Now when we come to India, I have studied quite a lot of estuary zone. Yes?
Sorry to interrupt you. We are witnessing the first slide. Have you changed the slides?
You are seeing the first slide?
Yes, only the first slide was visible.
Oh, really?
Yes, now it's the Cochin estuary. Now you can see.
You did not see any of the slides I was showing?
We were just waiting that you are going to change the slides. So till now, only the first slide was visible.
No, I was changing slides all. Oh, you should have told me long back then.
Okay. So we are now at night slide.
You did not see any of the slides I was showing?
No, only the first slide was visible. So quickly, just show the previous slides.
Then you should have interrupted me long back.
No, I was just thinking that we'll be getting new slides. But anyway, you can just go fast with your slides shown earlier.
Oh God. Okay. I don't know why you didn't tell me. You should have told me. Can you see now? Can you see now?
Yes, it's visible now. This another slide, slide number 4.
Now? 7?
Yes. Slide number 4.
Can you see this picture, photosynthesis picture?
No, not yet. Now it's visible.
Oh, there's a lag? I don't know. Okay, so you should have told me.
Yeah, it's lag. It's lag. Okay, no problem. You go on gradually.
Okay, so I just recapitulate then maybe. So just please let me know if it is not changing.
Okay.
Okay, so what I was saying that when there is a, say in the ocean or any ecosystem, there is a fixed ratio in which this life takes these elements. Like for example, phosphorus to nitrogen to carbon, for example, there is a fixed ratio called Redfield ratio. And even, can you see now this even human requires them in set pattern?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, fine. So, okay, so let me just go back. Can you see here, history of nitrogen?
Yes, history of nitrogen visible.
Okay, I don't know what is happening.
Some lag is there.
Yeah, but I should have told you long back. Anyway, so see, what I was trying to emphasize is that when it comes to nitrogen, for example, the world was running out of nitrogen around 1900 because for nitrogen is used as a fertilizer to cultivate food, right? Now, when you have population of the world increasing, just a minute. Pointer. When I don't. Okay, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, so when the population of the world increasing, when population of the world is increasing, there was a need for demand in the food. Now, when that demand was not met because of this nitrogen produced through organic process, so there was so Haber and Boss produced fertilizer, right? By combining nitrogen and ammonium, nitrogen and hydrogen, they produced ammonium, which was later oxidized to produce nitrate. So the need for the world's fertilizer to produce food was met through this process. Now, when you start using this, can you see the chain now 100 to 14? This slide?
Not yet. It's Haber and Bosch slide.
Okay. It's better I come there. I think that is the better way to do it.
No, carry on. You are slide number 13.
Oh, you still you don't see here this chain 100 to 14. The fate of Haber was nitrogen. You cannot see.
No, photograph Haber and Bosch is visible.
Okay, so there is a lot of lag, I think.
Sir, some students can see, sir.
Oh, it seems the other system, the students who have joined from other places, they can see.
So
yeah,
this student see all this Mississippi thing I showed?
Yeah, sir.
So it looks like Atul sir, you have problem.
Okay, yes, it seems that in the Department of Geology, the strength of the signal is weak. So you may carry on. Okay.
Okay, the word hypoxic and eutrophic coastal system you saw?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So I will just recapitulate what I meant, okay? Before I go to the Indian settings. So see, the thing is this, that you require nitrogen for the sustenance of life. You require nitrogen to produce food. Now, without nitrogen, you cannot, you cannot imagine life, you cannot imagine food, right? Now, because then somewhere around 1800 or 1850, it was seen that the requirement of nitrogen to meet the demand of food of the growing population of the world was not met through nitrogen already existing in the system, or nitrogen which was being introduced through biological nitrogen fixation. So Haver and Boss produced this ammonium, and then so much fertilizer was being pumped into the system, or being pumped into the system now, that a lot of nitrogen is excess into the environment. Now all nitrogen which is excess into the environment is being passed out by this aquatic system, by the rivers, streams and all, and they are ultimately being brought to the big rivers and from there to the coastal zones. Now when they come to the coastal zones, then once this nitrogen comes into the coastal zones, the process of photosynthesis accelerates. When it accelerates, you produce a lot of algae into the system. When you produce a lot of algae into the water, what happens is this algae starts to die or decompose. When they decompose, opposite of photosynthesis happens, and then they require oxygen. So they consume a lot of oxygen into the water. So because it's consumption of the oxygen, you create a situation which we call a hypoxia or hypoxic situation. And that is very dangerous, because when you do not have oxygen, many zooplankton, fishes and all, they don't find it comfortable to live, or some of them die even. So basically it hampers or breaks down this, what do you call, the ecosystem chain. So that is the general concept I told so far. Now let us come to Cochin estuary. Can you see now Cochin estuary written?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So now, in India also we have a lot of estuary. So I have worked in estuaries like Cochin estuaries, Sundarbans and Mahanadi, etc. So I'm just going to show you some photographs of Cochin estuary. Some of you, if you have visited Cochin, they call it backwaters of Kerala. It's very beautiful. I mean, if you have not gone, you should go and enjoy it. But when you go as a tourist, it appears really, really beautiful. So you see all these green water, all these very pictures, green water, and then you have this lifeboat and houseboat. But when, as you go as a scientist, you see that a lot of this industrial waste is being pumped into this backwaters of Kerala or Cochin estuary. And then there are some aquaculture fields where they put a lot of nitrogen or fertilizers to produce fish, etc. And then they release that water directly into the estuary. And then, of course, you might have seen these all if you have visited, it's fine. If you have not, then there is these are called houseboats, and there are like hundreds of them into the lake called Vembanad Lake in the backwaters, and they dump all their, excreta or whatever the waste they have into this lake water. So there is nothing but, in a way, they are introducing a lot of nitrogen into the system, a lot of all these nutrients into the system, and then again, this create this whole water very greenish. So what we did, if you take out a funnel like this with some kind of a net and drag for say around 10 to 20 meters or 50 meters, you see this water is all greenish in color. This is nothing but this formation of algae because of this nitrogen. So what we did, we wanted to see that at many locations along the estuary, we wanted to see that what is the rate at which this algae take up nitrogen. So what we do some kind of an experiment. We go there, we take a water of bottle, and then we add some nitrogen into the bottle and allow these phytoplanktons to take it for a fixed amount of time. And the nitrogen which we add is all 15 nitrogen. As I told you earlier, the nitrogen in the environment is all 14 nitrogen. What we add is all 15 nitrogen. For example, if you say the nitrate molecule is NO3, right? And sodium nitrate is NaNO3. Where their nitrogen N is all 14 in the nature. What we add as a salt is all 15 in the nature. So all 15, which is we commercially take from this Cambridge Isotope Laboratory, and they allow these phytoplanktons to take all the nitrogen which we have added. They take it for 4 hours or 5 hours or sometimes 12 hours. We do the experiment and then bring back to the lab and measure it, that what is the rate at which they have taken the nitrogen which we have added. So that is how we do the experiments. So we calculated the rate, and what we realized that the rate at which they are taking is quite high. So just to compare, if you go to the open ocean, this rate at which they take is somewhere around this bottom, just above the zero. But here in the estuary, we saw that it is quite high. But luckily, even if they are quite high, because it is estuary, it's a very dynamic system. So there's an interplay of high tide and low tide. So dissolved oxygen concentration is not touched even the hypoxia level. It's still above the hypoxia. So oxygen has not gone to the level where we should be worried about it. But we don't know if we continue doing like this, and then we have a lot of organic matter production and this decomposition taking place. Maybe one day there will be a situation where we'll have a hypoxia in the system. Now, one freshwater ecosystem which we worked long back is called Lake Superior. Lake Superior, as you know, is a freshwater lake. It's very big. Actually, it's almost 600 kilometers long and 200 kilometers wide. Now, it's at the border of America and Canada. Now, it is one of the largest lake in the world, freshwater lake. This lake has one problem. See, if you go and measure this chemical composition of all the elements in the lake, it's almost fine, except this nitrate is increasing a lot. So last 100 years, what they have observed is that nitrate has increased from 5 micromole per liter to almost 35 micromole per liter. And people are perplexed at how come only nitrate in the lake has increased so much. Why not other constituents? So if you work in this field, the most common thing you will assume that, okay, because we are having a lot of fossil fuel, we are burning a lot of fossil fuels, a lot of this nitrogen is going into the atmosphere, and because of this atmospheric nitrogen, this nitrate is being deposited at the wet deposition or dry deposition into the lake surface, which is building up nitrate into the lake. But when we went into the problem a little detail and did the budgeting, what we found is that nitrate influx into the lake is almost same as nitrate outflux. Means whatever nitrate is coming into the lake, same amount of nitrate is getting out through the lake. So how come there is a buildup? The buildup is almost the same amount. Then we did that speciation of nitrogen, a different species of nitrogen, for example, ammonium, organic nitrogen, nitrate, and then we realized that what ammonium, etc., whatever is coming into the lake in this form is somehow getting nitrified in the lake itself, and that is probably the reason why this lake is building up nitrogen, the nitrate into the system. How did we know that there is a nitrification taking place in the lake? Then we did this isotopes of nitrate in the lake. We did 15 nitrate has nitrogen and oxygen. Sorry, nitrogen and oxygen, and we do 15/14 ratio in nitrogen and 18/16 ratio in oxygen, and then what we saw that a lake oxygen isotope, probably 2.4, this symbol we call per mil, this 2.4 is very similar to what we produce through this nitrification. So this gave us a confidence that, okay, whatever this nitrate buildup is happening in the lake, it's probably because of this nitrification of this other forms of the nitrogen in the system. So far I have told you a story of nitrogen where there's too much of it. Like either it is like the aquatic system in the coastal waters or estuary or in the freshwater system, because you have pumped too much nitrogen into it. But now let us see some of the terrestrial ecosystems. Can you see it now? Can you confirm me?
No sir, slide moving नहीं हो रही है.
नहीं हो रही है?
No sir.
कहाँ पे स्टक है?
सर 28 पे स्ट्रक था.
अरे यार तो, oh God, कुछ मेजर प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है लग रहा है. 28 यहाँ पे?
या सर.
अरे तो पहले बता नहीं रहा हूँ, प्रॉब्लम बताइए.
मैसेज.
Can you see now?
Yes sir.
38?
Yes sir.
मैं फुल व्यू में जा रहा हूँ तो लगता है प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है. अभी चेंज हो रहा है?
Yes sir.
चेंज हो रहा है, लेकिन अभी स्लाइड 39 पे है. ये स्लाइड 41 हो गया.
40.
और ये सब कुछ नहीं दिखा आपको जो मैंने चेंज किया?
लेकिन पहले किसी कार्यक्रम में भी एक प्रॉब्लम था. जब आप फुल स्लाइड में जाएंगे तो देयर इज अ पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ सम प्रॉब्लम सर.
वही फुल व्यू में आई एम गोइंग एंड लुक्स लाइक देयर इज नॉट हैपनिंग, राइट?
यस सर. अगर आप फुल ब्लिस से, हां जी सर.
अभी कैन यू सी टेरेस्ट्रियल इकोसिस्टम?
Yes sir.
Okay, fine. So Hello. Yeah, so far I was talking about that aquatic ecosystems. Now, just few days ago, can you see this slide, review ecosystem ecology written?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So few days ago, a paper came in Science, a journal called Science, where they're saying that there are vast expanse of the earth where there is no nitrogen. I mean, nitrogen availability is almost not there, which is very, it is opposite of what I was telling you till now. Till now I was telling you that there are regions of the regions where there is a lot of nitrogen. It's creating havoc because of this organic matter production and then leading to hypoxia, etc. Now there is a vast region where there is no nitrogen, particularly in Sub-Saharan Africa, South America, and then in that part of the North America, etc. Because these regions which you see red here, China and India, etc., they receive a lot of nitrogen. Even the aquatic bodies around America also receive a lot of nitrogen. But there are regions, they are called nitrogen limited regions. And these regions, people are worried that there is not enough nitrogen in these regions. The photosynthesis or the whole ecosystem productivity may go down. So they have just given this this figure where they have shown that nitrogen availability has been actually. Can you see this figure now, where there is a graph for nitrogen availability index?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what they are saying is somewhere around 1800 till now, this nitrogen availability has been consistently declining. Actually, it's not increasing. In fact, it is declining. What they have done is they have measured nitrogen isotopes in the leaf, in the stem, in the soil, etc. And they are saying constant decline. I mean, they are saying decline in the nitrogen. And from there, they are saying that nitrogen in the soil itself is decreasing. So what will happen if there is no nitrogen in the soil? They say that when there is no nitrogen, you will not have nitrogen in the forest, like in the leaf and in the stems of the plants. Because of that, all these small organisms, all these insects thriving on these plants, they will reduce in numbers. Their reproduction will go down, and then it will move into the food web. That's the reduction in the nitrogen. And then because there is no nitrogen, the protein in this grass will go down, and because the protein will go down, the animals which are thriving on them, they will also have effect on their body size, and then ultimately they will have reduced production. So you see, at one angle you have increased nitrogen, which has devastated the ecosystem. At the other point, when there is no nitrogen, then again it is devastating the ecosystem. So it's a very different kind of a game which happens. Now, again, what happens in the system when, in those kind of an ecosystem, when you give nitrogen? Suppose, let us assume that there is an ecosystem where there is no nitrogen, and then you give nitrogen to them. If you give too much of nitrogen to them, what happens? For that, long back I had done an experiment where, can you see now this N2O production in a chronosequence?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what we have done is that there are 4 different kind of soils where there was a forest which had just been cut. Then there was 15-year-old forest, 80-year-old forest, and 125-year-old forest. Now what I did is I took a soil from here, 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 and here, and then created 2 different kind of situation. Can you see this experimental setup written?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So now let us assume that you take soil from all these systems and then and I ask you to do an experiment. What you do is, in this soil, take a bottle, put some soil, and you add some water in it, and then add ammonium in one set of bottle, and then put some more water and put nitrate in this bottle of the water, and where 80 is written. And then you measure this nitrous oxide in the headspace of the bottle. When you measure nitrous oxide in the headspace of the bottle in 2 different scenarios, then you see where it is written nitrification favorable, you will see that there is almost very little production of nitrous oxide. But in the next bottle, where you have added more water and nitrate into it, you will see this N2O production goes very high, very high. See, their scale is different. Their scale goes from 0 to 0.6, but here it goes from 0 to almost 80 ppm. So there is huge amount of N2O production. And if you remember, I told you earlier that N2O is a greenhouse gas. Nitrous oxide is a greenhouse gas which which participates in the climate increase in the Earth's temperature. So in a scenario where there is no nitrogen and suddenly you increase a lot of nitrogen through that atmospheric deposition, then process like denitrification may kick in. Okay. when the denitrification kicks in, they produce a lot of nitrous oxide into the system. So that is also a worry. Now, when it comes to India, can you see soil nitrogen dynamics in Indian soil?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There's very little study when it comes to Indian soils. There is a study by ICR, Indian Agricultural Research Institute, etc., in the agricultural systems. They basically work on the crop productivity and what is the health of the soil, etc. But when it comes to biogeochemical processes like production of nitrogen, decomposition, mineralization, etc. of nitrogen, there is absolutely very less or no data at all. So I had a PhD student, Niharika. She works on soil nitrogen dynamics in Indian soils. Can you? Oh, now I'm going to. Can you see now?
Yes,
Can you
sir.
see that in India?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what she did is she applied. She wanted to understand that what is the nitrogen production capability of the Indian soils in different ecosystems. For example, if you go to Uttarakhand in the Himalayas, she wanted to see that what is the effect of altitude and temperature condition. What happens when you bring the soil from Himalaya and increase the temperature? What happens to its nitrogen production capacity? When I say nitrogen production capacity of the soil, what I mean is that when you take a soil, there is organic matter in it, right? As I tell you that any organic matter, they decompose. That is called process of remineralization. So when the microbes act into that soil, this organic matter, they decompose to produce nitrate and they decompose to produce ammonium. When that ammonium comes into the system, that ammonium gets oxidized to produce nitrate. So once nitrate and ammonium comes into the system again in the soil, they are again being taken up by the plants, right? To do the process of photosynthesis. So that is what I mean when I say nitrogen production capability of the soil. But what happens to the capability when you change the temperature or you change the altitude? Now, if you go to the Gujarat, this desert soil of Rann of Kutch, where salinity is very high in the soil, what happened? What effect does increase in salinity has on those soils? Now, when you go to Western Ghats, like in Goa, what happens to nitrogen production capacity there? And then she also did some experiments in the soils of Kerala. So let us just see results one by one, okay? See, when you go to Kutch, the soil appears something like this. There is no life in Rann. If you heard about Rann of Kutch, it is soil salinity is quite high. But it's not all of Kutch is like this. There are some area where there is a vegetation. Can you see this graph where it says semi-arid soils, Rann of Kutch, etc.?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So what we did, we bought soil from Rann of Kutch, some agricultural fields, some grasslands, and then we did this nitrogen mineralization experiment where we wanted to see that how nitrogen is produced in the soils. So if you see the red line, that is the salinity in the soil. So when there is written salt flats at these two locations and these two locations, the salinity is quite high, that is around 25. And when it is wetlands and grasslands, salinity is quite low, right? But you see, when salinity is low, this nitrogen production capacity is very high. When salinity is quite high, nitrogen production capacity goes quite low. It means the soil which has a very high salinity has very less capacity to produce nitrogen. So in this paper which we have published, what we say that in a coastal region which undergoes quite a lot of seawater inundations, that may lead to increase in salinity in the soil. And because of this increased salinity, this nitrogen production capacity of the soil itself may go down. Okay? And when there is no nitrogen in the soil, you cannot have a growth of plants, etc. So ultimately, it may lead to desertification. Now, this experiment was done in the soil in the Uttarakhand, in the Chamoli district, where we bought soils from 1,000 meter, 2,000 meters, 1,500 meters, 2,500 meters height. And then we increased the temperature. Say we did one set of experiment in the refrigerator where it was 10 degrees centigrade, and then at the room temperature where there was 22 degrees centigrade. Because average temperature when we collected the soil in that region was around 11 degrees. So what we saw that when you increase the temperature, if you look at the below graph, where there is a hollow and a dark circles, the hollow circles tells you the nitrogen production capacity at a reduced temperature, and then the dark circle tells you nitrogen production capacity when it is high temperature. So in Himalayan soil, for example, if you increase the temperature, this nitrogen production capacity, chances are potential is to go up. Now in the Western Ghats, Western Ghats, as you know, is a biodiversity hotspot. It's a region where there's a lot of it's a very dense forest, a lot of different kind of species of exists. And there we did this experiment. What we found is in Western Ghats, in fact, nitrogen is in the soil of Western Ghats is quite a lot of nitrogen. If that nitrogen cannot be explained through the natural production. So the experiment we did, we found that this X amount of nitrogen which is being produced in the soil, the nitrogen, total nitrogen in the soil was much more than that. So where did that nitrogen came from? Then we did some investigation and found that there is an additional source of nitrogen in the Western Ghats soil. That additional source may come through this atmospheric deposition or weathering of the rocks. So very recently, their paper came in 2019, I think, a paper came in journal called Nature, where they said that weathering of rocks also can contribute to nitrogen in the soil. But we don't know how much and how which rocks are contributing to addition of nitrogen in these soils. Now in Kerala, we did one experiment where, Kerala is very famous for rubber, right? There are some plantations, rubber plantations. So they clear some forests to grow rubber. And then what we saw, we did these experiments in 3 different kind of forests: managed forest, unmanaged forest, and rubber plantation. And then we saw that when you replace a general forested ecosystem with rubber plantation, the production capability of nitrogen in the soils goes down. It means the soil likely becomes kind of infertile when you do that kind of from multi-cropping to monocropping in the soils of Kerala. So, so these are the few of the experiments which we have done in the different soils of different soils in the Indian systems, and some more studies are still going on. So, just to recapitulate. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So now we have reached almost to the end. Unfortunately, this whole slide change thing came in between. I'm really sorry about that. But if you see that there is some area on the earth which has a lot of nitrogen in it, a lot more than required, and that creates a situation like hypoxia into the system. And there are the vast expanses of the earth where there is almost no nitrogen, or we call it limited by nitrogen. And those scenarios creates a lot of problem. In one scenario, you have a situation where you degrade the ecosystem, you degrade your water quality, you produce greenhouse gases, you create a situation where there's no oxygen in the water. Then other you have that you don't have enough nitrogen to grow plants. You don't have enough nitrogen, or you have enough nitrogen to grow plants in such a way that in future it may hamper the productivity of the ecosystem itself, which can have ramifications for the entire food chain. So this is what I was talking about, that too much or too little of nitrogen in our ecosystem. So in the summary, I think I just have to say this thing, which I really liked, which was a prophecy by the Cree Native American tribe. They said that only after the last tree has been cut down, only after the last river has been poisoned, only after the last fish has been caught, only then will you find that money cannot be eaten. So this is the scenario where basically we have to conserve our ecosystem in such a way that you kind of maintain a balance. But it's a very difficult scenario because you have to put fertilizer into the ecosystem in the ecosystems to meet the food demand, and at the same time you have a region where there is no nitrogen at all. So how do you do it? That we have to find a way forward actually. So thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev, for your wonderful presentation on the nitrogen. And though there was some technical problem, but
I think next time is to do it when I'm there. That is better.
Yes, only Praladji from our department, he pointed out that the slides are not moving. But anyway, so from the initial first slide, the information which we have gathered from your presentation is very, very useful for us and students also. Before I ask the students to ask any questions if they have, I'm having one query. Number one is the map which you have shown with respect to India, the vast Gangetic plain that you have left, and I think that area must be taken into account for the study of what you all, the team is doing at PRL.
Yeah, actually, when it comes to say my recent interest has also been the rivers, and we are doing quite a lot of riverine studies. And Ganges, for example, we published some papers in Ganges also, and we in fact are looking for some locations where we can do time series samples. So for that, probably I will contact you, because we need some locations, some stations around the Ganges where we can collect those samples.
And one more suggestion or one more query from my side, because if we are confined to the state of Bihar, in the North Bihar plains, we have so many wetlands, the Oxbow lakes and other depressed areas filled up with water, and the flood scenario is also in the regular fashion. So every year we are getting fertile soil, or the soil alluvium coming from the Himalayas. So year after year, we are getting the nature of the soil is different. Maybe they are being deposited in one area or in another area. Plus the human habitation, the population is also so dense. So these things, I think, in our part of the country, that is Bihar, North Bihar plains, will be one interesting observation with respect to nitrogen, which PRL and under your leadership is doing all about.
Sure. Yeah.
So this is from my side, and any of the student or any participant of this program, if you wish to ask something, or if you have or any observation, I think Kavi Vishwapriyaji, the director GSI, he has also joined this program. Akuri?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. It was a pleasure listening to Sanjeev, and
sorry, but they look like there was some major issue. I think.
No, there was no issue. You were very prompt and clear in your deliberation. There was no issues on that. Yes, there was some sync which was required between the slides and the thing we were trying to present, but that was hardly, there was a marginal flaw that can be really, I mean, it was not a major consideration as far as your presentation was concerned. And I really enjoyed your presentation, Sanjeev, and it was very emphatic and nicely done. And in fact, the moment it was advertised by Dr. Abdullah Pandey sir that you were going to speak on this topic, I was excited to be a part of this program, to listen to you. And I would also like to mention here that to our young friends who are in the university right now in the MSc stages, that myself and Sanjeev were together during the 93-96 batch of Science College, and we have gone through the same drill and the same passage of grooming that probably you are going through. And of course, sky is the limit. Try to pursue geology as a subject because it's a very interesting science. And of course, there are so many interdisciplinary aspects also related to geology which can pursue, like what Sanjeev is doing. He's got a very strong stint working in the United States of America also, and later he came down to Ahmedabad, where he's doing a great job over there. And as Sir rightly pointed out, and Sanjeev also mentioned in his remarks, that we would like to do more of offline programs so that there is more interaction with the audience, and we could contact on a one-to-one level also. So the glitches of online problems can be taken care of. And of course, it was a brilliant presentation, Sanjeev. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vishnupriya ji. And I can see one student, Kumar Gautam. आपने अपना हाथ रेज किया है, शायद आप कुछ पूछना चाहते हैं या कुछ बताना चाहते हैं?
Yes, sir. One question, sir. How much the impact of agriculture in nitrogen, just like we are using too much of urea or something?
Yeah, so that is the whole issue, Gautam. Say we are putting a lot of, say, even in our, if you go to our agricultural fields also, we are putting a lot of nitrogen, right? We are putting up urea. If you say urea is NH2, CO, NH2, so you have like nitrogen right there. So, and then whatever you put, that, I mean, you see that, I don't know whether you saw that. Let me just go back. That is what I was talking, but unfortunately, are you seeing this slide? Fate of Hema of nitrogen?
Yes, sir.
Are you seeing the slide where it's written the fate of ever was nitrogen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So the thing is that nitrogen which comes from the factory is around, let us say, 100 kilogram, and then you put nitrogen fertilizer, consumably 94. In crops, it goes only 47, right? Do you see?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you see -6 below and -47 below?
Yes, sir.
So these all have leaked into the system, leaked into this from the agricultural field to the rivers to the streams. Okay.
Yeah.
Now when you cut this crop, this 47 goes back to 31. Then 31 goes to 26, and 26 goes to 14. It means by the time it comes into your plate, only 14% of the nitrogen which was intended to begin with has come to your plate. So rest of them has gone into the ecosystem. Now where is that nitrogen? That nitrogen is still cycling in the system, right?
Yes.
So you're right. Like we are putting a lot of nitrogen in the system which is not being utilized, and that is the major concern.
Yeah.
Any question on the student side? MSc students or faculty members, if you have any question. So if you don't have any question, may I now request faculty member Prahlad Kumar Arya ji to formally propose a vote of thanks for this wonderful presentation made by the alumnus of our department, Dr. Sanjeev Kumar. Vishnupriya ji, kindly mute yourself.
Thanks, sir.
Kindly mute yourself. Prahlad ji.
Ji, sir. Thank you, sir. First of all, good almost afternoon to everyone. ये आज के प्रेजेंट सबसे पहले तो प्रोफेसर अतुलादित्य पांडे सर, जो हमारे हेड ऑफ डिपार्टमेंट भूगर्भ शास्त्र विभाग पटना यूनिवर्सिटी, जिन्होंने मौका दे रहे हैं मुझे ये वोट ऑफ थैंक्स के लिए। और हम खासकर आज इसलिए बहुत ज्यादा उत्साहित हैं कि जो सब्जेक्ट मैटर चुना गया आज एक प्लेटिनम जुबली सीरीज के अंतर्गत और साथ ही साथ ऑर्थोडे के अंतर्गत, और नाइट्रोजन जो सब्जेक्ट जो हमारा जो एलिमेंट है उसका जो रोल पूरे लिथोस्फेयर, बायोस्फेयर और एटमॉस्फेयर और उसके सर्कुलेशन का जो रोल है, उसको जिस तरीके से डॉक्टर संजीव कुमार सर जो PRL अहमदाबाद से हमारे वन ऑफ डिस्टिंग्विश्ड एलुमनी हैं, जिन्होंने जिस तरीके से प्रेजेंट किया वो एकदम फैसिनेटिंग था। और साथ ही साथ चाहे एक लेमन कोई भी नॉर्मल व्यक्ति जो कि साइंटिफिक कम्युनिटी का है या नहीं है, वो भी इस पूरे के पूरे लेक्चर को सुन करके डायरेक्टली कनेक्ट कर सकता था। प्लस इसके जो द बेस्ट फैसिनेटिंग पार्ट वाज कि अगर कुछ वर्ल्ड के ऐसे भी पार्ट्स है जहां पर कि नाइट्रोजन का कमी और उसका जो रेमिफिकेशन जो है वो भी डिवास्टेटिंग है। ठीक है, अब तक हम लोग यूट्रोफिक कंडीशन के बारे में जानते थे, हाइपोक्सिक कंडीशन के बारे में जानते थे, बिकॉज ऑफ एक्सेसिव नाइट्रोजन का इस्तेमाल जो वेरियस फील्ड में हो रहा है, खासकर एग्रीकल्चर में। लेकिन नाइट्रोजन के न रहने के कारण भी जो डिवास्टेटिंग सिचुएशन है वर्ल्ड के कुछ पार्ट, जस्ट लाइक चाइना का जो उदाहरण दिया गया। और सबसे अच्छी चीज था वर्ल्ड भी इन्वॉल्व है इसमें, हमारा इंडिया इन्वॉल्व है, प्लस केरला का कुछ जो आपका एक्वेटिक पार्ट है वो इन्वॉल्व है, प्लस कच्छ का भी जो उदाहरण दिया गया। तो एक होलसम वे में एक कंप्लीट बेहतरीन प्रेजेंटेशन, स्पेशली आज जो मदर अर्थ डे के ओकेजन पर और साथ ही साथ प्लेटिनम जो सीरीज के अंतर्गत, और वन ऑफ द बेस्ट पार्ट की हमारे एलुमनस जो कि PRL अहमदाबाद में है और उन्होंने दिया। तो एक कंप्लीट एक्साइटिंग मोमेंट रहा हम लोगों के लिए, एक कंप्लीट जर्नी रहा नाइट्रोजन के पूरे डिफरेंट फॉर्म का सर्कुलेशन, जो भी हमारा लिथोस्फेयर, बायोस्फेयर, एटमॉस्फेयर और उसमें जितने भी नाइट्रोजन के जो पार्ट्स है, डिफरेंट वेराइटीज, उसका सर्कुलेशन। थैंक यू सो मच संजीव सर। पर्सनली आपसे मिलने का मौका मिला था लास्ट टाइम जब आप डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ जियोलॉजी में विजिट किए थे, लेकिन आज का जो प्रेजेंटेशन है तहे दिल से और स्टूडेंट के बिहाफ पर, डिपार्टमेंट के बिहाफ पर, थैंक यू सो मच। बहुत बेहतरीन प्रेजेंटेशन के लिए, और शायद आज रात तक, दिन तक ये चीज हमारे दिमाग में मंथन का पार्ट भी रहेगा। थैंक यू सो मच सर।
Thank you, Prahlad ji, for the vote of thanks on behalf of the Department of Geology. और जैसा हम सभी जानते हैं कि ये लेक्चर सीरीज हम लोग प्लैटिनम जुबली के अवसर पर मंथली लेक्चर सीरीज आयोजित हो रहा है, और हमारे जितने भी डिस्टिंग्विश्ड अलुमनाई हैं उनको विभाग की तरफ से जो प्लैटिनम जुबली ग्रुप का एक लोगो हम लोगों ने तैयार किया है। डॉक्टर संजीव कुमार हमारे छात्र, हमारे अब फिजिकल रिसर्च लेबोरेटरी में अपने डिपार्टमेंट का नाम रोशन कर रहे हैं। आपको विभाग की तरफ से हम लोग एक मेमेंटो अभी तो यहाँ शो कर रहे हैं, और फिर ये आपको पोस्ट से आपको वहाँ फिजिकल रिसर्च लेबोरेटरी अहमदाबाद भेजा जाएगा, और आप जब कभी पटना आए तो आप इसे अपने विभाग में एक बार पुनः जरूर आए। थैंक यू ऑल ऑफ यू। संजीव, इज इट विजिबल टू यू?
Yes, it is visible. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Kindly switch on your camera so that we can see you.
It's on, right? Can you see me now?
No, not yet. हमारे सिस्टम में ये नहीं है। Anyway, यही लैग है, शायद थोड़ी परेशानी है।
काफी लैग है, एक्चुअली काफी लैग है।
So Dr. Ravindra